Live from Washington, D.C., this is Balance of Power with Joe Mathieu.
Fed Day edition. As President Trump kicks off his Affordability roadshow in Pennsylvania, we're going to have a decision on interest rates just about 1 hour from right now as we talk economy and rates with Martha Gimbel from the Yale Budget Lab a bit later on this hour ahead of our special coverage that starts at 1:30. First, though, our conversation with an icon of rock in D.C. this week to testify on Capitol Hill for music royalties after receiving the Kennedy Center honors in our studio moments from now. Gene Simmons from the band Kiss. You don't want to go anywhere. Let's start, as always, by setting the baseline on Wall Street. Charlie Pellet has the markets for us an hour out from rates. Charlie, how are we doing?
Right now we are looking at a mixed market, just about the best level of the day. Got to tell you, Joe Mathieu, we cover it all from Fed policy to rock and roll. That's what we do here at Bloomberg. S&P right now up by about 8 points. Gain there of just about 0.1%. Yes, music royalties as well. Dow up 211 now, up by about 0.4%. We've got the NASDAQ Composite Index lower now by 39 points, a drop there of just about 0.2%. Russell 2000 index of small cap shares higher by 0.3%. Our Mag 7 index down 0.2%. Dow Transport's up 0.9%. All ahead of the Fed decision coming up 1 hour from now. Right here on Bloomberg, we get the decision. And of course, Jay Powell's news conference coming up 2:30 p.m. Wall Street time right here on Bloomberg Radio. So we got you certainly covered on the Federal Reserve today. Again, S&P trading very close to session highs right now, up 9, a gain there of 0.1%. The 10-year 4.16% with a 2-year ahead of the Fed decision, 3.58%. Gold right now down $8, little changed, right at 41, just below 4,200 now, 41.99, down 0.2%. West Texas Intermediate crude also in the red, right now down 0.3%, 58.08 a barrel on WTI, and Bitcoin down by 0.4%, 92,320 on a Bitcoin. Fed officials coming up. We'll have Jay Powell's news conference again, 2:30 Wall Street time. Chinese artificial intelligence startup DeepSeek is relying on NVIDIA chips banned in the country to develop an upcoming AI model. That according to a report and the information, which cites sources. It says NVIDIA's Blackwell chips are being smuggled into China through countries that do permit their sale. NVIDIA has responded to the story, saying it is pursuing any tips it receives, and also says smuggling, quote, seems far-fetched. NVIDIA shares right now, they are trading lower. NVIDIA down by 1%. Brian Kahn has pleaded guilty to defrauding hedge fund investors of about $300 million, a scandal that hastened the collapse of the retail company that he bought. Coming up after the close of trading, lots of earnings. Among some of the names reporting after the close of the bell, we will be hearing from both Oracle today, Chewy also checking in, Synopsys, and Adobe Systems. So again, recapping here, Dow, S&P, they are both advancing. Well, Fed officials, they're about to rock and roll all day and party every night. Let's head back to Washington now. Once again, here he is, your host of Balance of Power, Joe Mathieu.
And that's something coming from the voice of the New York subway and the voice of Wall Street. Charlie Pellet, thank you and welcome to the Wednesday edition of Balance of Power. I had to think for a minute because time has become abstract. Just take a look around and see what's happening in Washington this week. Of course, we're always here for you in the nation's capital on Bloomberg TV and radio as we try to connect the dots between Washington and Wall Street. And today, ahead of our special Fed coverage, and before we start boring down into the Fed and interest rates later on in the program, we zero in specifically on the connection between Washington and the music industry, regulation, and I'll point you no further than an op-ed in the Washington Post. The headline, Congress, I have a plea for you. It was written by Gene Simmons. Yes, that Gene Simmons, who was on stage at the Kennedy Center last weekend, the Kennedy Center Awards. You saw him in the Oval Office with Donald Trump. And you also saw him testifying on Capitol Hill yesterday before the Judiciary Committee for something called the AMFA Act. This is about music fairness, royalties. Listen to what he said.
How do we dare come in second to Russia, an alleged country led by a despot, when they do a better job of paying our king of rock and roll, and we're going to stand by and not pay today's artists and future artists, because let's face it, our children are tomorrow's stars. You got to change this now for our children and our children's children, and I know you will. The president will sign this once all you guys respectfully get your act together and put this across the board. Let's do the right thing. God bless America.
He's talking about the American Music Fairness Act's proposed legislation that may or may not get a floor vote. But of course, with the support of the president, that would go a long way. It's got the support of Gene Simmons, and he's with us right now in studio. You spent the week in Washington. Thanks for making us part of it.
Well, it's my pleasure. And people are shocked. I'll try to encapsulate what all this is for. I know that's a big word like gymnasium. Look, I don't care what kind of music you listen to, but the American music, let's just stop at that point. American music means we created and invented the music of planet Earth. Rock and roll, blues, jazz, hip-hop, country and western, all invented and created here. Our stars are the stars of planet Earth. You can go to Africa and hear, you ain't nothing but a, no matter where you go. Yeah. Every Christmas, everywhere around the world, people listen to Bing Crosby, I'm Dreaming of a White Christmas, written by Irving Berlin. The astonishing, stunning, and shameful fact is that no matter who you hear on AM and FM radio, they're getting 0 pennies for the airplay. So let's play a game. Who's your favorite recording artist?
Kiss.
No, come on. Somebody from the past,
Why can't we go with
future.
that? All right, Jimi Hendrix.
Jimi Hendrix. Jimi Hendrix has never in his entire career or now ever gotten paid a single penny when his music is played on AM and FM radio. The stunning fact is that the Russians and some other countries actually do pay performing artists on radio, land radio, AM, FM, right. And Americans do not. And this has got to change and should change. Look, I make a living, and people of my age and, who've climbed the mountain, clawed and scratched their way to the top, we're blessed by the American dream because it is alive and I'm living proof of it. So I make a living. But the new artists, every penny counts. And the fact that they can be played on radio and not even make 1 penny for their performance is criminal.
So this is surprising to a lot of people. We're on the radio right now. You see that big radio mic in front of you there? It's such a good radio show, Gene, they put it on TV. And I've been knocking around the radio business for a minute. We hear about BMI and ASCAP fees. Has this always been the case, or was it simply an exchange? You play my music for exposure, for publicity, and I sell tickets and I sell albums, and that's now out of balance. Is that what happened?
Artists are not interested in negotiating how their careers are built.
Understood.
Radio needs
where did the ASCAP BMI fees go?
ASCAP and BMI specifically relates to writers and publishers, which doesn't affect the masses whatsoever.
So is this radio's fault or your contract with the record company? How come the middleman isn't giving you money?
Nothing to do with the record company, because they make money when they sell records, and writers and producers. This is the actual recording artist. You like Elvis, you like Sinatra. When you hear that song on the radio, the people we tune in for actually never get paid.
Amazing.
Everybody else gets paid, the writers and the publishers and the advertising dollars. Radio last year made $14 billion. You know how much of that went to the Sinatra estate or Tame Impala or all the new bands?
I think I'm getting
zero.
Yeah. Okay, that's in contrast to satellite radio,
but
digital
we're
platforms.
Not talking about
no,
that.
I know, but I just want to square that you're suggesting the radio industry is behind the times because all of these other platforms
I'm not suggesting
are paying
anything. I'm stating fact that AM, FM radio is, well, I want to use language that doesn't get anybody legal involved.
Okay.
In the patois of the street, it's criminal.
Yeah.
You cannot. America is based on the premise that if you work hard, you should get paid. So everybody's getting paid. When a radio station, AM and FM broadcasts, the executives get paid, the advertisers pay money, the billboards on the street, which use our name and likeness for free. If you use my name and likeness, otherwise, I would take your firstborn and your house. But radio is allowed to do that. They keep $14 billion. And the new artist, by the way, who's trying hard to make it, is not going to make those precious pennies to help them survive. And that's, as far as I'm concerned, my opinion is, it's criminal.
Listeners, you write in the op-ed, are more likely today to discover new music on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, TikTok. At the same time, more and more local stations have been bought up by big corporations like iHeart and Odyssey. They still play the music without paying the artists, often hits that listeners already know, in order to generate ad revenue. I've, as I mentioned, worked in radio for a while, and I've seen rampant consolidation in this business. Has that made it worse?
Well, one way or the other, whether it's consolidated
fewer
or
potential
not,
payers
the
now.
result is the same. A truck runs you over, and the guy comes out and says, I'm sorry I ran you over. I didn't mean to do it. Or, I don't like you. I ran you over. What's the difference? You've been run over. So the question is an interesting dialectic, another big word like gymnasium. The result is nothing's changed.
Okay.
The artists are not getting paid. That, I mean, especially our children and our children's children are going to be the next generation superstars after they climb their way to the top and fight for it. What do they have forward to look? What do they have, looking forward? They're going to get 0 pennies when their songs are played on AM and FM radio, and that's insane.
Do you have the president's support on this? Did you talk to him about it?
I spent some time with the president alone in the Oval Office, and we talked about family. And I've known the president, proud to say, before he became a politician. But what else we talked about is a private issue.
Okay, so that wasn't about legislation, I guess.
I didn't say that, but you're leading the witness, Your Honor.
Oh, not to. Well, I wouldn't think that would be private.
Well, these are semantics, but I'm not anti-semantic.
I hope that you're not, because we wouldn't be able to do this right now.
There was a little clickbait there. What I talked, yes, I specifically said what I spoke with the president about is not for anybody else's consumption.
Okay.
Well, there is such a thing as privacy.
I completely understand. I only ask you because so many lawmakers come on the air and say, if we get a directive from the president, we can make this work. What did you hear in the committee from members? Did you get a sense that there are votes on this?
I've heard a lot of support.
Yeah.
I met privately with Senator Marsha Blackman and Mr. Schiff. Both sides of the aisle seem, let's just say, as soon as Congress gets their act together, the president will sign this. I'm convinced of it, my personal opinion.
Well, our audience should know, and you're talking to the business community right now, that you are no stranger to big business and some pretty shrewd moves. It was a Bloomberg report when you sold your publishing rights last year. Pop House Entertainment, $300 million.
It's not entirely accurate, so just here to correct it for the record.
Please.
An entity called Pop House, a futuristic company out of Sweden, came and bought Kiss, the underlying rights, the makeup, logos, as well as the writing publishing, for a respectable sum, enough to buy Rhode Island. I give you a pregnant pause so that it sinks in. But the future looks even more gargantuan than the past. We are in the middle of the first motion picture to be directed by McGee. There's an awful lot of stuff that I can't talk about because nobody wants to find out where they're going to get for Christmas in July.
Fair enough.
There's an enormous commitment by Pop House in the future of Kiss, and this is just the beginning. When you look at a caterpillar and you say, well, that's the end of its life, no. You're short-sighted. You don't understand that it's going into a cocoon, which is where we are now, and we're going to come out and defy gravity with beautiful wings and soar to the heavens.
Very poetic.
I am kind of a big deal.
I've heard that, and a poet.
I was a fan, actually, of Bloomberg when he was mayor. Met the gentleman, and he struck me as a powerful and attractive man.
Well, I can only agree with that.
And I loved his algorithm that made him rich and fit, but that's another story.
Well, I'll tell you what, we've got the terminal right here. I'm sure there's a disclaimer I'm supposed to read somewhere, but with everything you just described, you just outlined the future of the music business. Why are you chasing down the old format?
Well, look, the old formats, if they worked and they were justified, should and would continue.
Yeah.
But tell me what your retort is, even though I know you're not retorted. How do you validate our stars, the people who fought their way to the top, never getting a cent for radio airplay? How do you validate that while radio is making $14 billion? Again, I'm not demonizing them. It bears noting we need each other, but somewhere between paying artists $0 and $14 billion, there should be remember, the name of the act is fairness.
Yes, right.
American Music Fairness Act. You should let me talk more. I can increase more people will watch this instead of SpongeBob SquarePants. Come on.
I believe that. That's why you're here. Nobody gets this much time, Gene Simmons. Okay, so you've said a lot. Well, we consider the future of the music business. Do you worry about AI regulation? Do you worry about these FACO bans coming up? Speaking of algorithms, and by the way, Mike Bloomberg is not only the boss here, but founder, chairman, Bloomberg LP.
That's right.
AI is a worry for you or not?
AI is a concern if left unregulated. Anything, beautiful horse that you just bring in, if it runs wild, you've got to have some parameters that we control instead of AI. Right now, there's a country in Western Star that's got a #1 record of sorts on some chart. Doesn't actually exist.
Yeah. What do you think of that?
Well, let me just go. The major problem here, potentially, hypothetically, and otherwise, is that if states have the right, and this has to be settled right away, the government must get a federal law that encompasses all of AI to get some sanity out of this, because if you can do AI legally in Delaware, where you have all your companies, so you don't pay, so you pay less taxes, because you're a very bright man besides being good looking. Why should they want to do real music and real art in New York when they can just go to Delaware and do AI? No, you need a federal law that encompasses the entire country, and I would highly recommend, and I would hope the entire planet really gets together. It's an issue for the UN to get a world body to accept it, because it's going to happen to the same thing that happened to the unions in America. You charge too much here, so we'll do business in China. No, you want to address the AI issue worldwide so we can control what the rules are, the comings and the going, and what's the income stream, who owns the IP, who's the owner of the trademark ad info. And I'd like to announce that I'm running for...
If you were a kid, you bought a guitar, you wanted to get in the music business, what would you tell them? Turn and run?
Well, I would tell anyone to do as I did, which is to say to have a fallback position, because anything that you pour your heart and soul into has a pretty good chance, and that means likely 95% or more, you will fail. And in my case, I became a 6th grade teacher and an assistant to the editor of Vogue magazine, Kate Lloyd, and the assistant to the Puerto Rican Interagency Council, Magdalena Miranda, for the Boricua community, where I did work for a government research and demonstration project, ad infinitum ad nauseum. In other words, if your thing doesn't work out, what's the backdrop? I know you took ballet lessons. If this doesn't work out,
and I've lost my chops,
and, do your thing.
I'm not keeping up with it.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool for you to be here, and I appreciate it very much. It is the American Music Fairness Act. That's what he came here to talk about. You don't need me to tell you. Gene Simmons, only here on Balance of Power. I hope you enjoy the rest of the trip in Washington. Many thanks for being with us. I'm Joe Mathieu in the nation's capital, a conversation you will only hear, especially on a Fed day, on Bloomberg TV and radio. The Fed, of course, will be announcing a decision on interest rates a little more than a half an hour from now, as Charlie just mentioned. Michael McKee has made his way over to the central bank, and he'll be in place to not only deliver that news as part of our special coverage, take a look at the dot plot, but he'll be in the room for the news conference with Jay Powell with always some compelling questions. 25 basis points is the idea here, the final meeting of the year. As I read in the Bloomberg Daily Brief, the surprise may come from how dovish or hawkish the guidance is. And this decision is coming against the backdrop of a big debate in Washington over affordability, the buzzword here, one that the president is not terribly fond of and even calls a Democratic hoax when we consider the issue of prices, inflation. The president beginning a road trip in Pennsylvania last evening in which he tried to get his arms around the issue. Listen.
They gave you high prices. They gave you the highest inflation in history, and we're bringing those prices down rapidly. They say, oh, he doesn't realize prices are high. Prices are coming down very substantially. But they have a new word. You know, they always have a hoax. The new word is affordability. I have no higher priority than making America affordable again. You can give up certain products. You can give up pencils. You don't need $37 for your daughter. 2 or 3 is nice.
2 or 3 is nice. Martha Gimbel joins us now as we walk up to our special coverage with her eyes on the Fed. Executive Director, co-founder of the Yale Budget Lab, former senior advisor, the White House Council of Economic Advisors. Martha, it's great to have you back on Bloomberg TV and radio. What does the Fed think of affordability?
I think the Fed is trying to really maintain its dual mandate here and not get sucked into the political conversations of the day. So they're not trying to get into conversations about $37 for your daughter or $3 for your daughter. They're trying to think about what's happening with labor markets and what's happening with inflation.
Well, which one are you more worried about today?
You know, I'm itchy about inflation. I do think the overall state of the economy is obviously confusing. You do have some weakness in labor markets, which obviously you've seen some people on the Federal Reserve responding to. At the same time, you know, inflation has been really sticky. We have not seen real progress on inflation since mid-2024. And so it's a little bit odd that the Federal Reserve is almost certainly about to cut interest rates by another 25 basis points when they really are not all the way there on their inflation goals.
So I'm glad you're with us because you were on the White House Council of Economic Advisors in the Biden administration when prices were peaking. Is this where we're at now? Is this a last mile story, or did the president's tariff regime reignite the issue of inflation to make the issue worse?
Yeah, I mean, if you looked at where people thought we were going to be at the end of 2025, you know, sort of consensus was that inflation was going to be about 2.4%. So, you know, basically heading towards target. The last inflation reading we had on CPI was about 3.0. So obviously pretty substantially above where people thought we were headed. Now, you know, counterfactuals are hard, who knows? But we've certainly seen evidence that tariffs are starting to push prices up. I would also emphasize the immigration decisions, right? When you are pulling people out of the labor force, when you are making it harder for employers to hire, that is going to drive up prices, particularly in certain sectors like agriculture, construction, and that's not helpful either. So overall, I would certainly say that the administration's policy mix has been on the inflationary side. That's certainly what we've seen in our analysis here.
Well, I know we've been without a lot of data because of the government shutdown recently, so it's difficult to put numbers on every answer here. Martha, the president said simply last evening, quote, "We inherited the highest prices ever, and we're bringing them down," unquote. Are those two statements true?
I mean, inflation is not the highest that has ever been, certainly not when he inherited it. It was higher many times in history. Just after World War II, it hit 20%, which thank goodness we never hit in the aftermath of the pandemic. You know, inflation is hard enough. The cost of living issues that are facing families are hard enough. It does not help to not take them seriously and to not think carefully about what the data is showing us about where we are and where we could be headed. Yeah.
Kevin Hassett is speaking on another network right now, Martha, and I've just got my eyes on the headlines crossing the terminal. Of course, you know that he's been reported by Bloomberg to be at the top of a very short list here to replace Jay Powell next year. He just said that Donald Trump will make the final Fed chair choice in the next week or two. Is the market prepared for Kevin Hassett, if that's the name?
I mean, you've been seeing some reporting that people in markets have been going to Secretary Bessent and suggesting that the markets would not be happy about Kevin Hassett as Fed chair because, there's some concern about Federal Reserve independence with him at the helm. We will have to see. I think markets have been, frankly, overly complacent about the issue of Federal Reserve independence. It is very clear that this administration would like interest rates to be lower, in my opinion, regardless of the overall economic situation. And frankly, we've seen this before. We've seen this in the 70s. We've seen this in other countries. When you lose Federal Reserve independence, or even when it's simply threatened, that really hurts the quality of your economic governance, and it hurts economic growth, and it hurts residents of the country. And so
Understood.
I really do think that we need to be prioritizing that, and that markets need to be responding to that.
Does it matter that he's on TV every day defending the president's economic policies and defending the president's approach to the Fed? Because he's become very good at that as a political animal inside this administration, but it's a very different job running the FOMC.
It's a very different job. I mean, you have had people who have been, part of economic policy in the White House, then joined the Federal Reserve before, who have taken Federal Reserve independence very, very seriously. So it is not the case that simply because someone has worked in the White House that they cannot do a good job at the Federal Reserve. I want to emphasize that. But I do think that it is important that Kevin Hassett, or anyone who is nominated, makes it very, very clear that they are going to prioritize Federal Reserve independence in the face of a president who doesn't seem particularly interested in it.
Interesting. What's the question you would have for Jay Powell if you were in the news conference today?
I want to know if he's going to resign his seat. I think if he stays on after he's chair, which he can do, which would be unusual, that may provide some reassurance to investors about, the votes that there will be for steady macroeconomic management at the Fed.
Well, he's going to have a lot to talk about today, not only the decision, but also the dot plot that we'll be chewing on in our special coverage. And I'm really glad that you could join us, Martha, to spend some time here. Martha Gimbel, Yale Budget Lab, former senior advisor, the Council of Economic Advisors in the Biden White House. We thank you, as always, for the insights. Quite a half hour here on a Fed day. We started with Gene Simmons. We resolve with Lisa Abramowitz and Tom Keene. Yes, it's time for special coverage. Coming up straight ahead, a special edition of Bloomberg Surveillance. The Fed decides. Tom Keene and Lisa Abramowitz live from World Headquarters in New York straight ahead. I'll meet you back here on the late edition of Balance of Power. That starts at 5 p.m. Eastern Time as we try to keep the beat on politics here in Washington with a big decision on rates straight ahead. Stay with us only on Bloomberg TV and radio.